Good morning, everyone. The Committee on Education Workforce will come to order. I note that a quorum is present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to call a recess at any time. Thanks to all of our guests for joining this year's Member Day hearing. Non-committee members are invited to share stories, policies, and issues from their home districts to help inform our decision-making as we move forward with legislation. The committee plans soon to pass key pieces of legislation impacting post-secondary education and the workforce, so we greatly value the input of members regarding their priorities. As one of the hardest working committees in Congress, the Committee on Education and the Workforce is an effective audience and advocate for members' concerns. We've reported 23 bills and resolutions from this committee so far this year, and 11 have passed the full House. Furthermore, I'm a firm believer that no committee speaks to the issues impacting everyday working Americans quite like the Committee on Education and the Workforce. Our jurisdiction spans from child care to college classrooms to pension funds and everything in between. For these reasons, a wide variety of perspectives are not just admissible, but welcomed and encouraged. I look forward to members providing the committee with views today which help broaden our horizons. With that, I yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today, the committee is gathered to hear from members of Congress about their priorities for improving our education system, supporting workers, making health care more affordable, and strengthening our economy. The committee's jurisdiction covers a wide range of policy areas impacting Americans throughout the country, from birth to retirement. In fact, in last Congress, the committee Democrats advanced legislation that had reduced our unemployment rate to historic lows, added millions of jobs to the economy, reduced health care costs, and saved the pensions of over 1 million workers and protected thousands of businesses, all while fulfilling our promise to ensure that students have access to high-quality public education through the most significant one-time federal investment in K-12 education in our history. Regrettably, this Congress has not been quite as productive. We focused mainly on culture wars and ways to undermine labor unions, and despite the unprecedented rise in child labor and multiple requests from the minority, we have yet to hold a single hearing on what Congress can do to end child labor law violations. We're responsible for receiving input and ideas from members of Congress representing all parts of this diverse nation. Today's hearing provides us with an opportunity to hear from members not on this committee on the work they believe remains to be done to support our communities further. So thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the members for being with us today. We welcome your input and look forward to working together to ensure that America is a country where everyone can succeed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Before I dispense with the legal aspects, as you all know, votes are going to be called fairly soon, and we'd like very much to get this done before we have to leave to go to votes. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. 14 days after the date of this hearing, which is December 15, 2023. And without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material referenced during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. Members will have 5 minutes to discuss their education and workforce-related priorities. I remind those members that they're also able to submit written testimony in support of their legislation. I now recognize Representative Brad Finstad from Minnesota.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member Scott, for the opportunity to present an important issue to the Education and Workforce Committee. I am proud to represent Minnesota's 1st Congressional District and advocate on issues that are top of mind for Southern Minnesotans. As you both know, the largest COVID-19 fraud in the nation, Feeding Our Future, took place in Minnesota. Feeding Our Future exploited USDA child nutrition programs to steal over $250 million in taxpayers' money meant to feed hungry children. Indictments later revealed that fraudsters purchased luxury homes, vacations, cars, and even private jets on the taxpayers' dime. To date, 60 individuals have been charged by the U.S. Department of Justice in connection with this fraud scheme. I've been proud to work with Chairwoman Fox, Chairman Kilmer, Chairman Thompson, and the rest of the Minnesota Republican delegation in conducting oversight of the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Minnesota Department of Education in their oversight of improper payments to Feeding Our Future. And I look forward to continuing this work until all responsible parties are held accountable and we get to the bottom of how these agencies allowed this fraud to happen. Unfortunately, USDA and the Minnesota Department of Education have not fully complied with this committee's oversight efforts. It is time to take further action to ensure accountability and identify the bureaucratic failures that led to this massive fraud scheme. I urge you to consider H.R. 4786, the Feeding Children Not Fraudsters Act, which would audit any cases of COVID-related fraud committed through USDA's child nutrition programs to provide Congress the information necessary to fix any bureaucratic failures and hold those responsible accountable. I look forward to working with members on both sides of the aisle to advance this legislation, and I hope the committee will strongly consider this important step to conduct proper oversight of this massive fraud scheme. Thank you again for convening this hearing and for the opportunity to list my priorities. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Finstad. Representative Kilmer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Ranking Member. I appreciate you having this Member Day hearing. I know we submitted written testimony to you, so I'm going to just talk a little bit about one of my priorities and tell you the genesis of it. A few years ago, I got invited to a YMCA in my district thinking they were going to talk to me about gymnasiums losing money during the pandemic. That is not what they wanted to talk to me about. They wanted to talk to me about fights breaking out in their YMCA over politics, over the t-shirt someone was wearing, the hat someone was wearing, the cable news channel they were watching on the elliptical. They literally had fights breaking out. And they said it's become so bad, we can't ignore it anymore. We've actually hired a consultant that's training our staff, training our board in conflict resolution. We're going to host some events to try to bridge some of the differences in our community so that the Y doesn't turn into the Jerry Springer show. And they said, just out of curiosity, any federal support for something like that? And I said, not that I know of. A few months later, we had some bad news in my district. We had a series of attacks on religious institutions. The Islamic Center was burned to the ground. We had a church vandalized. We had 2 Buddhist faith leaders assaulted outside their temple. And in the spirit of something good coming out of something bad, they held the Interfaith Solidarity event. And it was awesome. It was powerful to people saying, that's not what we're about. That part of living in a religiously and otherwise diverse, pluralistic democracy is you're going to live next to people who think and look and pray differently than you do. And it cannot come to violence and conflict. And afterwards, one of the faith leaders came up to me and said, that was a pretty powerful 90 minutes. But if we're going to do this right, we would do this in an ongoing way. And they said, any federal support for something like that? And I said, not that I know of, at least not currently. I looked into it. The United States actually does spend tens of millions of dollars trying to build bridges and foster social cohesion as a means of strengthening democracy in other countries through the National Endowment for Democracy. But we do not do that here in America. So I introduced a bill called the Building Civic Bridges Act. When we introduced it with 12 in the last Congress, there were 12 Democratic sponsors and 12 Republican sponsors. It would set up a pilot program through AmeriCorps to support some of these hyper-local efforts in our communities to try to bridge some of these differences across lines of difference. We chose AmeriCorps in part because they have footprints in most of our communities, and under their authorization, they're able to do some of that grant making. One of the other things in the bill is to actually provide training to AmeriCorps members so that they learn these skills related to bridge building, so that we can actually have people on the grounds trying to bridge some of the differences in our community. This bill has received the support of civic bridge building organizations, of faith leaders and faith groups. The business community groups like the U.S. Chamber and the Business Roundtable have endorsed it, and institutions of higher education who just want to see us overcome some of this toxic polarization in our country. We hope to introduce this bill again, and I would ask, as certainly as someone who has announced that I'll be leaving Congress next year, this is something I'd love to see us actually make some progress on. I think this is something we've got to. I do not want us to just accept this level of dysfunction and polarization in our communities is just something to get accustomed to. I'll just quickly mention, because I know we're short on time, I am heartened when we met earlier that you're working on WIOA reauthorization. As we met, the New Democrat Coalition has a number of priorities in that space. My Investing in Digital Skills Act was previously included in a WIOA in the last Congress. I'm hoping that it can be included again. The New Dems are also advocating for new ways for Americans to be introduced to STEM and trades, both in K-12 and in community partnerships. There's a bipartisan bill called the Creating Opportunities to Thrive and Advance Act that I co-lead that would expand career counseling and allow for public outreach so more folks can learn about those opportunities. Those are some of the priorities that I know when we met with you, Madam Chair, through the New Dems that we're hoping that this committee can consider. So with that, I know you're short on time, so I'll yield back the remaining 50 seconds and thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Kilmer. Representative Yakym, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member Scott. I appreciate you giving us, those of us who are not on the Education and Workforce Committee, an opportunity to present our priorities. I also want to thank you for calling a hearing next week to examine a topic that I'd like to discuss today: the outburst of anti-Semitism that has gripped college campuses in the wake of the October 7th attack on Israel. Madam Chair, in the nearly 2 months since October 7th, we as House members have met with the families of hostages and victims. We've borne witness to the utter inhumanity inflicted by Hamas terrorists on innocent men, women, children, and babies. We've seen the images and video footage that will forever haunt us. But closer to home, we've also heard disturbing accounts from Jewish and Israeli college students and faculty who have faced threats, intimidation, vandalism, and even physical violence. They say they don't feel comfortable wearing symbols of their faith. Hillel houses are hiring extra security. Such a climate of fear and intimidation on our campuses is unacceptable. It's baffling that so many of these institutions who police the most micro of microaggressions seem to be meeting this actual wave of anti-Semitism, this actual wave of aggression, with nothing more than a yawn. They'll throw the book at someone who uses the wrong pronouns. They'll spend time compiling a 13-page handbook of banned words, including American, immigrant, and grandfather. Yet eliminationist chants of, quote, "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," and, quote, "globalize the intifada," ring out among groups marching across the quad. Signs are raised that show a Star of David in a trash can with the caption that reads, quote, "keep the world clean." A sign at a recent protest at Reed College even read, quote, "Hitler would be proud." Madam Chair, what is going on these campuses? Some university leaders have stepped up with forceful words and actions, and they should be commended, but too many have not. As this committee knows well, most colleges and universities these days seem to have carnivorous offices for diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. I was curious to know what exactly is happening with the I in DEI in the wake of October 7th. And that's why on November 6th, I sent a letter to the top DEI officials at 110 colleges and universities asking some simple questions. Does the DEI office maintain an official written definition of anti-Semitism? Does it consider things such as slogans and signs that I described earlier to be anti-Semitic? Does it have any employees dedicated to educating or raising awareness about anti-Semitism, handling the allegations of anti-Semitism, and or promoting inclusion of Israeli and Jewish students and faculty? And what actions have been taken and what resources provided since October 7th to promote an environment of inclusion for Jewish and Israeli faculty and students? These 110 schools were not chosen at random. They were chosen because of at least one verified incident that could be considered anti-Semitic. It could have been chants or signs. It could have been something worse, like Jewish students being forced to barricade themselves for safety. It could have been statements from Jewish and Israeli students and faculty expressing unease with their campus environment. Some campuses have obviously been worse than others, but it's sadly proved easy to find at least one example in all 110. In fact, I'm taking this opportunity to announce that my office today will be sending an additional 16 letters to DEI officials. Let me be clear, one incident, one action by a few students does not damn a whole university, but it also doesn't make any of these questions less valid. If a DEI office is proud of its response and feels that it's got a good story to tell, I want to know. These letters represent an opportunity to confront or confirm the skepticism that many have about DEI offices. Madam Chair, it's become clear that October 7th revealed an anti-Semitic rot in the floorboards of our institutions of higher education. A recent Anti-Defamation League survey found that only 38.6% of students feel very or extremely comfortable on campuses in the wake of October 7th. That's compared with 63.7% before October 7th. I applaud your efforts to examine this important topic, and I hope we can work together moving forward to ensure that anti-Semitism has no place on our college campuses. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member Scott. Good to be with you all again. Thank you for holding this hearing and allowing me to share some of my constituents' priorities with the committee today. Despite gains in educational attainment since the original Higher Education Act was passed in 1965, Hispanic adults are less likely to hold a college degree compared to their peers. Because Hispanic students constitute a significant and growing portion of the United States student population, it's imperative that we address the gaps in educational success and college degree attainment. There are more low-income students and students of color enrolling in college than ever before because a college degree remains the most certain path to upward mobility in the United States. However, these students face many obstacles to completing their education, including high school coursework that fails to prepare them for college and additional barriers to enrollment, financial aid, and other processes. These students may also face unique challenges with reliable transportation and childcare, unstable housing, and limited on-campus support. To address these issues, Congress must take greater steps to ensure that historically underserved students have the resources they need to succeed in college. This means investments in K-12 education programs that fund America's public schools, investments in teacher training, support, and compensation, investments in retention and completion, and investments in research and development at Hispanic Serving Institutions, or HSIs. I urge this committee to take up two bills I've introduced this Congress to address these issues. The Hispanic Educational Resources and Empowerment, or HERE Act, I introduced with Senator Alex Padilla, would authorize grants to fund partnerships between HSIs and school districts that serve a large percentage of low-income and Latino students, fostering a college-going culture and preparing students for college success. Together with Senator Cory Booker, I also introduced the Advanced Coursework Equity Act, which would increase the enrollment and performance of underrepresented students in advanced courses, including 8th grade algebra, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, and dual programs, and more. When I got to college in the fall of 1992, I met students who had earned dozens of college credits through advanced coursework before they even got to campus, accelerating their path to graduation and preparing them for the rigors of a tough school. At my Title I public high school in San Antonio, there were only 3 AP courses available, and very few students had the same opportunities as my future classmates at Stanford. I think my time may have run out, and so I want to thank you all for having us today and urge you to consider these two pieces of legislation.
2 minutes remaining, but if you want to yield back, we'll.
Oh, the timer went out, I'm sorry. I'll just finish up real quick. Across the country, the story is the same for millions of students. The 2020-2021 Department of Education Civil Rights data collection showed that 39% of more than 31,000 public middle schools did not offer Algebra 1. Of the more than 26,000 public high schools across the country, only 75% offered chemistry, 67% advanced mathematics, 61% offered physics, 49% offered computer science, and 48% offered calculus. Disparities in access to advanced courses for underrepresented students, including Black and Latino students, is particularly concerning. For example, approximately 35% of schools with high enrollments of Black and Latino students offer calculus, compared to 54% of schools with low enrollments of Black and Latino students. And Latino students represented 27% of total high school student enrollment, but account for 20% of students enrolled in AP Science and AP Computer Science courses, and 19% of students enrolled in AP Mathematics courses. Talent is distributed across every American community. I think we'd all agree on that, but equal opportunity is not. So thank you for your consideration, and I urge consideration of these bills.
Thank you very much. Representative Fitzpatrick, you're recognized for Fitzgerald.
Fitzpatrick, you had it right the first time.
I had it right the first time. Fitzpatrick, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing us to advocate on behalf of our constituents here today before your committee. The mental health crisis facing our nation, specifically amongst our kids throughout this country, requires immediate action by this Congress. Over the last decade, cases of anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges have dramatically increased amongst our youth. In fact, it's estimated that over 40% of our school students throughout this country do not have adequate access to comprehensive mental health resources. Madam Chair, Ranking Member, the combination of these increased needs for mental health resources in our schools and the national shortage of professionals in this field have exacerbated this crisis. And as co-chair of the bipartisan Mental Health and Substance Use Disorder Task Force, the largest bipartisan task force in this body, I'm proud to support the efforts that will directly address the needs of our students. That is why I introduced H.R. 3228, the Mental Health in Schools Excellence Program Act. This bipartisan bill will authorize the Department of Education to partner with higher education institutions across America to assist in covering the costs of students pursuing careers as school psychologists, school counselors, and school social workers. Strengthening the workforce pipeline will increase access to comprehensive mental health resources for students to ensure that our kids have the resources they need to succeed. I encourage all of our colleagues, particularly those on this committee, to join us in addressing this mental health crisis amongst our school students by working to provide sufficient resources to ensure that no student is left behind in their fight to succeed in this country. I would also like to address the importance of strengthening and modernizing our nation's nutrition programs supporting our children, specifically the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children. The WIC program is a crucial source of nutrition for low-income women, nursing mothers, infants, and children, and one of the most successful and impactful initiatives the federal government operates. As a result of the global pandemic, the WIC program had to find new ways to offer services to ensure that participant needs were met. In this new remote environment, it became clear that there had to be ways to modernize this program, and I'm proud to lead H.R. 2424, the Modern WIC Act, which will streamline access to WIC benefits. This bipartisan bill will provide remote service options for WIC applicants and participants. Madam Chair, Ranking Member Scott, modernizing this program will allow more families to receive and utilize benefits and ensure that our children have a healthy start to their lives. I urge my colleagues to continue to support these common sense initiatives that will modernize our bureaucracy in an effort to support American families and particularly America's youth. And finally, I would like to address the issue of increasing educational opportunities in schools and prioritizing out-of-school time programs. Investing in a robust, skilled workforce begins with investing in our kids. H.R. 3416, the Youth Workforce Readiness Act, would establish a grant program for eligible after-school programs to equip our students with the skills they need to succeed in today's very complex workforce environment. Expanding leadership development programs, expanding financial literacy lessons, and expanding mentorship opportunities are all essential parts of many OST programs. These will better prepare our next generation of students. I would like to insert, Madam Chair, for the record, a letter from the Boys and Girls Club of America regarding their support for the Youth Workforce Readiness Act.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and the Ranking Member. Thank you for the opportunity to address these critical issues, not just for my constituents, but for women and children across America. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Representative Wenstrup, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member Scott, for hosting this Member Day hearing and for the opportunity to speak this morning. I appreciate it. The Education and Workforce Committee is vital to advancing policies that help students learn, workers succeed, and job creators to thrive. As a physician who serves in Congress, I'm focused on ways that we as members of Congress can enact policies to make America the healthiest nation on the planet. When we talk about health in general, we should be discussing things that make Americans healthy. And this committee plays a vital role in that effort by overseeing programs that affect all Americans from early learning and well beyond that. I appreciate the role this committee plays in education policy and look forward to continuing to work with you on all ways to improve the education of Americans in an effort to have a healthy nation. One of my highest priorities in Congress is H.R. 2630, the Safe Step Act, which I have worked on for several years with my colleague, Dr. Ruiz, California. The Safe Step Act is based on state laws that have passed in 38 states, including my home state of Ohio, as well as North Carolina and Virginia. This important bill would ensure that employer plans offer a medically reasonable and expedient step therapy exceptions process. Currently, health plans, particularly self-insured employer plans that are exempt from state laws, often require patients to try and fail on insurer-preferred drugs before the plan will cover the treatment initially selected by the patient and their provider. The insurer never saw the patient, doesn't know the patient, and their medical history. So when medically inappropriate, such delays in care brought about by someone other than the patient's doctor, it can lead to severe or irreversible consequences. Earlier this year, I was proud to see the Safe Step Act favorably reported out of the Senate Help Committee as one of the only patient-driven bills under consideration. In a nation that makes unprecedented investments in innovative treatments and cures and has the potential to offer the best health care in the world, these delays in care are regressive. Step therapy, when used inappropriately, disrupts the doctor-patient relationship by making it more difficult for a physician to prescribe the care their patient needs. The Safe Step Act allows plans to continue to apply step therapy to drug decisions, yet it ensures that plans allow patients and providers to access a quick exceptions process if a step therapy protocol is inappropriate for that patient. I commend the committee for their support in addressing this bill and the continued work of your committee staff, as well as all of my colleagues on the committee who have joined as co-sponsors. And I look forward to seeing the Safe Step Act pass out of this committee. I thank you for your time and consideration today. Thank you once again for holding this Member Day hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Wenstrup, for your testimony. And thank you again, Mr. Kilmer, for your testimony. Under Committee Rule 9, we would now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. Are there any witnesses or any members who wish to ask questions of our colleagues who testified? Hearing none. I can get it. I'd like to thank you again for taking the time to testify before the committee today. Without objection, there being no further business, the committee stands adjourned.